to the plus symbol and I select my material. So you'll notice that I have the densify material selected here. So that's the DS Lucitone. So because I know that these are try-in dentures, I'm selecting the try-in 3D print resin, not the other option, which is this one here, the digital print. That's for your finals. So these orders are already set up for you, so you don't really need to do these. The next is the type. So for the try-ins, there are two types. So there's DS try-in and DS try-in with aligner. So what is the aligner? The aligner is an extra step in the design that you can do that gives you basically an extra STL that allows you to set the teeth into it and then set it on the physical articulator, bond the teeth together in the bite. So that way your teeth are accurately placed together. Now, the problem with this is you have to think about your process. So it's an extra STL that you have to work into the print process. So if you have one printer, that means you're doing 3 separate prints now for one denture instead of 2. So this is why I recommend doing a full bridge of teeth, because if you do that, you don't really need the aligner. If you're doing multiple bridges or single units, then I recommend the aligner, because you drop all the individual teeth on the aligner, you put the bonding agent in the pockets, close the articulator down, and then that will allow you to bond things in the bite. That way they don't shift around and misalign with the bite. But again, it is an extra STL that you have to print. So I usually just do the regular DS try-in. And then once you set up your gingiva, the next thing you do is you go up to anatomy. Because the gingiva is already set up, it's going to default to the artificial tooth button here on the right. Like I said, if you don't do that in that order, then it'll default to the crown option, which is the leftmost small icon there. And then you'll have to change it. Now, I did talk about when you're doing like your design teeth and you can mix and match the way that you want to manufacture. So like for instance, if you wanted to print your base and mill your teeth, the reason that we set these up separately is so you can do that. So you can select 2 different materials, one for your gingiva base, one for your teeth. So if you were going to do that, you would go to the plus symbol here, select a milled material instead of a printed material. And that would allow you to do those separately. Since this is a try-in, it's going to make these monoblock. So I am choosing the Dentsply Sirona library teeth. That's the option that you're going to get if you want to be able to design your own teeth. If you're not going to design your own teeth and you're going to use denture carded teeth, then you're going to choose the other option, which is the Dentsply Sirona IPNs. So that's the carded tooth libraries, not the designing libraries. So that's how mine is set up. And then while everything's selected, I just hit the bridge button and that bridges all the teeth together. So I can actually set these up where I select both the upper and lower arches together. So if everything's highlighted, then I can go ahead and start the gingiva, go to the teeth, and then go to the bridge button and it'll bridge it in 2 separate bridges. You can, however, if you really want to get into it, you can bridge them in smaller bridges. So you would just select the individual teeth that you want bridged together and then hit the bridge button, and that will bridge just those teeth that you got selected in a bridge. So I know some people will do this. For example, they'll separate the large bridge into 2 pieces and separate it at the midline. That way the aesthetics at the midline are a little bit better. There's no connector in between. It's really up to you how you want to do it. If you do multiple bridges, you're going to have multiple design steps because you have separate bridges. It's kind of like with the crown and bridge module. If you design one full arch bridge, you have one anatomy design step at the end where that whole bridge is connected and you can sculpt it. With this, there's going to be multiple steps where if you did, let's say you did 3 bridges, you would have 3 of each of the certain steps, like the connector step, you would have to do that 3 times. The sculpt anatomy step, you would have to do 3 times. The coupling mechanism, all those 3 steps you would have to do for each individual bridge or individual tooth that you have. So it's a lot of extra steps. So that's another advantage to bridging everything together. And again, you can treat this just like a zirconia bridge or any other kind of bridge. You could take a disc and go in between there and divide out any areas that you want before you bond the teeth in, because the bonding agent will fill back up those extra spaces. So you don't need to worry about there being gaps or strength issues. Once those teeth are bonded in there, there's no strength issue. So you don't really have to worry about the connectors being too small, things like that. Does anyone have any questions about the order form at all?
Is it important to do the digital impression first or last step?
It doesn't matter. You can do it first or at the end. Just make sure you do it, because if you go into the design without it, you're not going to get all the prepare steps. One of the things, and we'll see this as we go through the prepare step, when it leaves that step, it has to have what we call a watertight model. So it'll have a base on it, it'll be closed on the bottom, and it'll be all watertight, not a shell scan like we're used to with crack bridge, which we'll talk about that when we get there. So I'm going to hit cancel here, and now we can all follow along. So we're just going to go into our immediate denture first. You can either click on it and then click on the arrow here, or you can double click on the order, or you can right click and go to design. So you have really 3 options as to how you can get into the design. So now, the first step that it takes us into is our refine step. So what is the purpose of this step? So what we've realized is that obviously not everyone has a trio scanner. So we know that based on the scans that we get in, we're going to receive typically 3 different types, file formats of scan. We can receive our file format, which we call DCM file. We can receive STL files, and we can receive PLY files. The quality of those files is not always the same. So we have some issues. If a scan file type has a lot of errors in it, it won't let you run through the design. You'll get a lot of errors as you try to go through. So one of the workarounds used to be, well, we export the scans as STL, we go into Mesh Mixer, we remesh the scans, and then we re-import them in on a new order. You no longer have to do that. That's what this refine step actually does. So you'll see up at the top left, it has some check boxes there. Remove scan artifacts, close holes, and improve scan orders. Those are typically the 3 main things that we have issues with. Now, one of the things that I get asked a lot is, well, why does my Sirona scanner, for example, when I import the STLs from it, why do I see nothing but dots all over my scan? Well, one of the things that most people will tell you right off the bat is that, well, Sirona's not a good scanner. That's not actually necessarily true. Sirona itself is not necessarily a bad or a good scanner. It has nothing to do with the actual scanning process. It's the file conversion process that's a problem. So Sirona has its own proprietary file format that it saves its scans in when you scan. The problem is that our software does not accept their proprietary file format. So it has to be converted to an open file format like STL or PLY. Now, the problem is with that conversion. So when you take basically a proprietary file format that has a lot of data and you strip it down and you make it into an STL, information is lost. So one of the things that you'll notice is when you process on like a Sirona scanner or even our scanner, it does a lot of things. It fills small holes in the scan. It fixes borders and things like that. You're allowed to trim it and make the edges really nice and clean. Well, the problem is during the STL conversion process, all that extra information is lost. You get the raw scan out. The raw scan is typically going to have a lot of errors, a lot of problems with it. You're going to lose the color, things like that. When you import it into our software, because it has a lot of errors and it's a raw scan, there's a lot of things that will pop up here. So that's why we put this in here, so that we can accept those STLs and other file formats a little bit easier and not have to jump it around from software to software just to be able to design. So
Also because of how big is the file, they reduce the files now, you easy transfer.
well, as soon as you bring the file into our software, it converts it over to a DCM. But because the initial scan was such poor quality, the DCM itself is poor quality. Yeah. So that's why we have to do this refined step. It fixes a lot of those issues.
When you import directly, instead of exporting out from InLab as an STL and then importing it, 3Shape now will go and import things in directly. Will it just do the same process, just export and take that file and convert it and then bring it in? Do you lose color also at that point?
I would say I could answer that if I have seen a case that actually works. So what I've found is that with that whole process, it's not working as intended right now. The scans are being lost. So something is happening when it takes those, I think they're .cad files that Sirona uses and converts them over to our DCMs. The files just disappear. So right now I'm not sure how it works exactly because I haven't.
We're set up for it, but it hasn't really used it.
Have you tried one?
I tried, I haven't been successful. Yeah.
I mean,
Have you imported anything directly from 3Shape without exporting out? No.
From my understanding, it's not actually working yet.
Is the goal for it to work in color and be a full conversion?
Yeah, so the goal is rather than you having to export those, create a case, import them in,
Right.
it's going to go through our 3Shape Communicate inbox. That's
Which is there. That does work.
Yeah. It's from what I understand, most of the time the scans disappear when they come into that inbox. So that's the issue that we're working on right now. I'm imagining that because Sirona can export PLY files now, that's the file format that we're getting, and those do maintain the color.
So are we better off exporting from InLab as a PLY instead of an STL?
Yeah, if you do it that way, you maintain more information.
You get color if you export as a PLY?
And that's why we
Worth the trip.
Yeah, that's why we opened it up to that, so that you can see the color from third-party scanners. So one of the things that we're all going to do here is we're going to select all in that box, and then we're going to click our refine button. And this just automatically goes through and fixes all those issues that we just saw. Yeah.
While it's working, sometimes I have an issue with if I click the improved scan borders, it either takes a longer time or it crashes. And if I don't click that, then it works. Any
Yeah.
particular reason for that?
It has to do with the issues at the borders
Okay.
of the scan. Again, the STL file conversion process isn't the best, and a lot of times you'll also see that, like with our scanner, if the doctor doesn't trim some of the, I call it Swiss cheese, because it looks like Swiss cheese is just hanging off the edges. They leave a lot of that on there, it'll cause a lot of issues and the software won't be able to automatically fix it. But luckily, you'll be able to trim later on, so just uncheck that, let it process, and then go forward, and then in the trim step, trim away a lot of that excess Swiss cheese, and then it'll be fine.
Okay.
So you can see now all of my points disappeared. You may see differences like in the scan, in the border of the scan where it cleaned things up. It actually tries to, if you do have quite a bit of little holes around the border, it actually tries to fill those in and give you a nicer scan border there. Sometimes it can and sometimes it can't.
Make this position.
So now what we're gonna do is we're just gonna hit next, and we're gonna do the same thing on the lower. So, because we are doing an upper and lower denture, we will need to fix both scans. So I'm just gonna select all and hit refine again. I do this even if I don't see any points show up, because it still does fix the scan borders for me and gets rid of some of that jaggedness there, smooths them up a little bit.
And if you have impressions, you can measure it.
So what would you do when it doesn't,
Right.
when you refine it and it doesn't fix the
Um,
problem?
the only time it won't fix a problem is if you get an error. So most of the time you're gonna see that in that scan borders, so you can just uncheck that box for refine it.
Exactly. No, for real.
Typically it'll tell you which check is the issue, and then just uncheck that one.
Because typically the errors are usually in school. That's what I usually do.
Yep. Then once you finish your refining of your lower, we're gonna go next to the occlusal alignment. So a question I always get here is why are there two occlusal alignments in the process? So there's one here, and then when we get into the next step, we have the one that has the two planes. The purpose of this one, so like I said, we're gonna be closing the bottoms of the scans and making watertight models, which will look like stone casts with a base. This plane is actually the way that those close. So if I leave this on this angle, then from up here, the bottom of this model will close parallel to this. So it'll close like this direction. I need to move it to where it closes more in this direction. So I try to position it on the occlusal plane as much as I can. Now, there are a couple ways that you can do this that make it a lot easier. So mine started off angled the way it was. So one way I can do this a little bit quicker is if I turn my view like this. Up at the top right, you have your slider bars. If I use these, I can turn certain scans off and hide them. So I'm going to hide my lower so I can see the occlusal of my upper. And then down here at the lower left, I have the set with points option. So if I select that, I can just click 3 points on my arch. So the second point, you always want that where your midline is. And then you'll see now it put it on the occlusion of my scans here. And then I can position this back where I want it. And then I can make some minor adjustments to it.
I didn't know that.
What happened? What?
Oh, you were further down.
This spot here, it doesn't really need to be
You're supposed to do this
ideally on the occlusal plane. It just needs to be kind of in the
So
ballpark.
this one, right?
Like I said, it just closes the
So
top
how
and
did
the
he-
bottoms of the scans. It's not really
Set
used
with
for
the
much
points.
else.
Oh, with the points. Yeah.
This is just to create a.
Does everyone know how to move your views with the mouse and things like that? Should I go over that for everyone?
You can just
Okay.
put it in the.
Okay, no problem. All right, so on your mouse, you have, technically you have 3 buttons. So you have your
This
left
one,
click,
my
your
claim
middle button,
disappeared.
and your right click,
Where
right?
did I go? Right.
So if I hold the left
Uncheck
click
this.
down, I can use this to rotate
Move
my
up.
views. So I can
Yep, and then
manually
click here.
reposition my scans in
And
there.
then click here,
Oh,
and then you
If I
set
three
take the
points.
middle mouse wheel and I scroll it, I can zoom in and out. Now, there is a trick to this. I want to point my mouse at the area that I want to zoom in and out from. So for instance, you can see my mouse is up here at the top right. If I scroll my mouse wheel right now, see how it zooms out there? If I point it right at my arches, see how it zooms right into my arches instead? So you always want to point your mouse where you want to zoom in or out from so that it zooms you into that area.
Unknown caller.
The last option for moving your views is, so that middle mouse wheel, rather than scrolling it, if you click it in like a button, so if I push it down, I can pan my views around. So those are your 3 view controls that you can do manually. That makes sense to everyone? A little trick that I like to show people with rotating the views, because a lot of people have a hard time of getting their views centered like this in the front. So one trick that I'll show you here is if you take your mouse, you hold the right click down and you make small circles, watch what it does here. So I'm literally just making small circles. See how it flips? So I can roll it until I get it flat. Like that. So that's an easy way to set your view. You also have on the toolbar here on the right, see those box icons there? So what I can do is I can get my initial view here set. So if I set, let's say this is what I want my front view to be. If I click this one with the eye in it, that now sets my front view every time. So if I take my scan here and I roll it off the screen like that, if I just come up here to this box here, the one that has the front view in blue, and click it, it now rolls my arch back into the front. So, and then the other 2, there's a back view here, and then a top view. So you can set that I button, and then that will give you your orientation for your views. Does that make sense to everyone? All right. Does everyone have their? So what I recommend doing is so move your view to where you're has the inclusion of the upper. Turn off your lower.
It's little things, right?
It really is little things that make it look right. Your centrals there on the side of the lead area, and then do the upper molar there. So now it sets your plane right on that occlusion, and then you can just kind of slide it and adjust it there. That's a little bit easier.
Are you gonna do design all day?
What's that?
Are you a designer at the lab?
Yeah.
Yep, and then if you roll your view over to like a front view
I've
or a side
definitely
view,
done
you'll see that it's right on that
amazing.
plane. So that's the easiest way to set it if it's really far off.
You design over there?
Some of them, not all.
No, it's fine. I scanned that denture case the other day. Exactly the same way.
I like the idea of chicken this time. We knew that? I didn't know that.
But you have to know how they got
Now
the
move
sand.
your views over to your front.
So as the lab, lab should know what he's doing, so you can yell at him when he screws it up.
So you click the I button, and then you click the front.
Alright. Now, let's just move this around. Now
It is
stop.
straight from
Stop. Now pick the one up.
This one?
Now hit that I button. Alright, now move your view to a weird position. Now hit the, not that one, that one. That's how it sets you back.
Shifts.
Alright, so now,
Yes. Right.
alright, so now that we're set here, we're gonna go ahead and select next and go into our trimming step. So there are some options down here at the lower left. Most people are going to immediately want to go and say, oh, I just want to keep all. That's actually not a good option for dentures. I'm going to show you why. So this arch button here is your keep all button. When I click on this, watch how it actually sets my cut line for my outline. So see how far away it is from the edge of the scan? If I do that, I'm going to lose border. So I don't want to set it like that. I actually like to manually draw mine for dentures because I don't want to lose too much information. So I'm going to delete this,
Yeah, keep all.
and then I'm going to click this icon right here, and then I'm just going to start clicking points around my edge.
But then he's saying to
I want
use
to keep as
this.
much as I possibly can here.
Yeah,
And keep in mind that most immediate dentures, you're gonna have short borders in some areas because
not that.
the scans aren't gonna be good,
Click-
the
click this one.
impressions, the traditional impressions typically
and
aren't
then now
the
you can
best.
just draw whatever you want.
So don't worry because again, these can be relined and they can pick those borders back up in the reline process.
You can just click on the blue icon, right, and delete the whole thing and then start all over. Or, right click on the blue icon, blue dots.
Now, if you mess up on a point, don't worry about it, just keep
And then it should
going.
be like a fast
After you complete your outline, you can go back and fix that.
You see how fast that is running? Then you can just draw wherever you want to extend it to. Instead of doing clicking like point by point by point. You can just hold it and then just keep going. Yeah, you don't have to hold on to it, you can just draw little by little too.
So once you complete your outline, you'll see that your scan turns green like this. The green area is what it's going to keep. The rest is going to be removed.
Missing area will be on the palate side, posterior palate. So it is short.
It is. Yep. And that's part of actually the reason I chose these scans in particular, because this is what you're going to see quite a bit when you get doctors who are scanning intraorally. They're just going to scan as much as they can and say, well, the lab can fix it. But you know that's what we're used to. So again, but you still have to keep in mind that these are reline dentures. So even if it's slightly short, they may be able to pick a little bit of that up in the reline. The nice thing though is that after this, after the patient heals and everything like that, they're going to take a wash impression inside this denture. And one of the things I've noticed from most wash impressions and dentures is that the super overextended area is the palate. Because all that impression material as it pushes goes out the back. So you're going to get too much information
because,
back when you go to do the
What would you
final.
like to do?
So it's just
step.
kind of
There we are.
Oh, then
a little
click
bit
preview.
reversed.
All the material comes in the anterior.
One of the things that I'd recommend as you're working with your doctors on these kinds of things is educate them. Get them on TeamViewer or show them what they're doing wrong. They're not going to know until you show them the reasons why they're having these issues with fits or things like that. So you have to stay in constant contact with them and build that relationship. Otherwise, they're going to say, oh, well, the lab doesn't know what they're doing. I'm just going to send it somewhere else.
Go back at your.
I want the outline and part of the.
Got it?
Yeah.
Didn't wall up. I was running a lot of points.
So like
Yeah,
here,
so
we
what
go
happened is if you roll your
the
view
low
up a little
boundaries.
bit, you
Yeah,
actually
click that,
click
and then start
outside
clicking the
scan,
points that you
not
want
on
to.
the scan. That's why I
Left click.
did that. So just go ahead and right click on it, on the white outline. That's gonna be quick, right, zoom in a little bit. You have to get your mouse cursor like right on the white line.
I don't see it.
Just redraw it.
Okay.
Okay, click that first.
Once you get your upper done, go ahead and hit next and do your lower as well.
And then now you can edit it. You see the blue dots over there? You can move around the way you want.
So, if you, let's say you mess up on your outline, so I'm going to go back to my upper here. If you mess up on it, you have two options to correct it. So, you have these blue points here that you can left click and grab and drag those around. If you have a really large area that you want to fix, and you want to kind of zoom in a little bit on this so that your white line shows up a little bit bigger, you want to get your mouse cursor right on the white line and right click
Or do you have
You
your
can
own
go to
lab?
fast
American
edit
Design
line
Design.
here,
American
and then I
Design
can
Design?
left click and
Is that
hold
the
and
Linux
draw
lab?
Yeah.
where I want it to go.
You
So
know
it
it?
depends on
Yeah, I know him.
how
Ah.
you're
But I don't
doing
know him,
this.
but he knows people that I'm
So
friends
if-
with
Does
okay.
anyone,
in
I
Philadelphia.
know you use one, does anyone else here use a 3D
Were
mouse
you
when
in
they
Philadelphia
design?
before?
No, I was in New Jersey.
You were in New Jersey?
So,
Before you moved to
if you're
Arizona?
using a 3D mouse to
When did you move
design,
down
it's
there?
actually easier to
2014.
just draw the outline.
Can I
Because
get a
you
deal
can
down
rotate
there?
your view as you're
Just
holding
a
the
draw.
mouse and drawing.
Yeah.
If you're
I'm a
not, you
prosthodontist.
wanna use the
Uh,
points.
Yeah.
So you have
Because it's
your
easier
own
to
practice
do
down
that.
there, right?
No,
Because
I
you have
work
to
for the
stop, roll
hospital.
your view,
We just go.
point.
Veterans
So,
Hospital.
Just depends on how you're designing.
That's good.
So the
I used
stylus,
to work for Clear Choice.
Hmm?
Clear Choice.
so do you use a lot of
Who, you
computers?
work?
Dental implant, yeah.
Oh, so it's lab or it's
No, no, I moved
I've
to,
found that most people who are
I quit
used to
Clear Choice and then I
designing
went to
on a
work
computer
for
what
do
made
not
you
like
quit
the
the Clear
stylus.
Choice?
it's pretty
The
good.
stylus is actually better for
Your choice
traditional
wasn't paying as
technicians
much?
who've been on the bench to transition over to design.
Is there a Clear Choice in Philadelphia?
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
It's nice.
In
My,
fact, we were in Scotland, Scottsdale, Arizona,
Uh-huh. Scottsdale? Yeah.
necessarily
You
that
were
it's
in
so much
Scottsdale?
easier.
for seminars
Because
over
you,
there.
Okay.
with your
From
mouse,
Clear Choice.
so you have an action button and you have a view button, a movement button.
Do you guys do
With
your own
the
mouse or do you guys
stylus,
outsource
Yeah.
it
there's
too?
certain
He's
hotkeys
one of
on
our
it that you
digital
have to
designers,
click
this
to
guy.
get to move, and then you have to click another
So
one to
I'm
get
going
back
to
to it.
take over the digital dentures with him. He does
Yeah,
more
that's what I'm
crown.
talking about. It's a pen and stylus that you can draw.
How many lab
Yeah,
guys do you have in the
the
company?
controls are on the stylus
About
though.
20.
So there's
About
certain
20?
things that you have to click and
Yes,
hold
20.
to move the views versus design.
Do you have milling
So
machines?
Yeah,
you have to get used to it.
just bought the
If you want
printer
to try
like
it,
last week.
the only company that I know
So we
of
wanna
that
go
sells it in
full
the demo
throttle.
space is Oregon.
Okay.
They sell the big touch screen, but it hooks up
What
to
printer did you
your
guys buy?
PC
That's it.
tower.
Oh,
It replaces
4K?
the monitor,
Oh.
but it has the stylus.
From
and you draw it.
who's the
I think
seller?
it's like
I
a
don't know, he
32
was
inch,
the one
so
dealing
it's
with
pretty
all
big.
the
It's nice
purchasing
because
and
you can tilt
sourcing
it down
quality.
so you can like sit over it and draw instead of having to draw like. Yeah. Yeah, you could, you may actually like the 3D mouse too. Yeah, so your left hand changes your views while your right hand's doing things. So it's a little bit quicker. That's how I like to design. I just don't show it when I'm here because most people just have the mouse, so.
I don't use it, yes.
I was gonna say it's a game, we don't really.
No.